Hello and welcome everybody to tonight's Future Salon, The Journey Beyond Fear with John Hagel. And I always like to open up with a little song, and The Journey Beyond Fear is like showing us what's beyond fear. And I came up with one of my favorite songs actually from the Tiger Lilies, the Crack of Doom. And so your life's been a success, and you have pleasure in excess. Don't worry, it will all end soon. The crack of doom is coming soon. And so your future's looking bright, and you have reached the giddy height. Don't worry, it will soon end. It's all shallow and pretty. The crack of doom is coming soon. The crack of doom is coming soon. And so your life has failed, and you made progress of a snail. Don't worry, you'll get your revenge, 'cause we are equal in the end. The small and mighty all the same. The life's a shallow facade game, where every empire goes to culture, and every ego will be crushed. The crack of doom is coming soon. The crack of doom is coming. And every dream, hope, and desire is just a flicker in the fire. And the fire it consumes. The crack of doom is coming soon. 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 So, John, do you have a antidote to the crack of doom?
Well, fundamentally, as an optimist, I'm hopeful that we'll avoid the doom and actually prosper. So that's the focus of the book, is helping us to make that journey.
Yes, and here it is, the book, The Journey Beyond Fear, and it's going in and out. I put it in front of me, then you see. Tell us all about it. We said that for 20 minutes you talk a little bit about it, and we are collecting questions, and then it's open for everybody to ask questions and see where the conversation is taking us. We can also break out in breakout rooms to have smaller conversations if we so want to. And if it comes up, please put suggestions in the chat if that is something that you would like to do. John, take it away.
Okay, what I'm looking for are the questions and the discussion, but I understand that I need to give a little bit of context about the book that I wrote. And I know there are some people in the group that have actually heard me speak about the book, so I apologize if I repeat for some people, but I'll try to keep it short and hopefully provocative enough that it will spur some good discussion. So I say that there are two catalysts for me in terms of why I wrote the book. And the first catalyst is that my entire career has been in business strategy. And I was taught to believe that strategy is everything. If you have the right strategy, you win. And over the years, I've come to actually see that it's less about strategy and more about psychology. That if we don't understand the emotions that are shaping our choices and actions, the best strategy is just going to sit on a shelf somewhere. And so I've become more and more focused on understanding emotions and the role they play in terms of the impact that we want to achieve. So the second catalyst, and here I emphasize that I actually started writing the book over 3 years ago, so well before the current pandemic situation. But I traveled around the world as part of my work, and I was struck that everywhere I went, the dominant emotion that I was encountering was fear. At the highest levels of organizations, in the front lines, out in the communities, fear was the dominant emotion. And while I think it's understandable, I think there are reasons for fear, and in the book, I certainly don't dismiss the fear. I believe fear is a very limiting emotion, and that we all have the challenge and opportunity to move beyond fear and cultivate emotions that will help us to have more impact that's meaningful to us. So the book is part memoir. I talk about my own journey through my life, but it also shares a lot of research I've done over decades now on these topics that I explore in the book. So it's a little bit of both. And at a high level, the book really focuses on what I call 3 pillars that can help us to make that journey beyond fear. And the 3 pillars at the high level are narrative, passion, and platform. And I say this with a lot of trepidation because I'm using words that everybody attaches different meanings to. And I have a very specific meaning to each of them, which is quite different from the one that I think most people would attach. So part of my challenge in the book was to really define what I mean by these pillars, why I think they're so important, and how to cultivate them. So the first pillar is this notion of narrative. And here I find that most people view stories and narratives to be synonymous. You can use either word and you mean the same thing. I actually believe there's a really powerful distinction to be made between stories and narratives. And at a high level, stories for me are self-contained. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end to them. The end, something happens to finish the story. And the story is about the storyteller, or it's about some other people, real or imaginary. It's not about you. You can use your imagination as to what you would have done in that story, but be clear, it's not about you. And so the distinction for me when I talk about narrative, number one, narrative is open-ended. It is not yet resolved. There is some major threat or opportunity out in the future, not clear whether it's going to be achieved or not. And the resolution of the narrative hinges on you. It's a call to action to say your choices, your actions are going to help determine how this narrative plays out. What's it going to be? It's up to you. You are front and center in the narrative. So I think it is a significant distinction. And there are many reasons that I make the distinction. In the book, I explore the role of narratives as a way to help us in this journey beyond fear at many levels. First of all, I think we each as individuals have a personal narrative. As institutions, companies, organizations, they have narratives. I believe geographies have narratives. And I believe movements have narratives. And we need to be really reflecting on whether these narratives are the kind of narratives that will help us to move beyond fear and cultivate hope and excitement about the future. And I'll just talk for a second about the personal narrative, because I find in the world of psychology, personal narrative is used all the time by psychologists. But when they use the term personal narrative, they're asking you, look back into your past and tell me how you got to where you are today. What's your story, basically, of how you got to where you are today? For me, a personal narrative is very different. It's not about where you were and how you got to where you are today. It's about looking ahead into the future and asking two questions. One is your view of the future primarily driven by a sense of threat or a sense of opportunity? And what would be the threat or opportunity that's most driving you, shaping your emotions and actions today? And then the other part of a personal narrative for me is, whatever that view of the future is, what's your call to action to others to help you on that journey towards that future? Do you have a call to action? And I believe many of us today, even though most people, at least in my experience, have not even articulated the narrative to themselves, they're living it on a daily basis, but they haven't articulated it. And when I probe on it, I find in most cases the personal narrative is driven by a sense of threat out in the future. There's something really bad that's going to happen and that scares me, and it cultivates the fear. And because I'm afraid, I'm much more reluctant to ask for help from others. This is all on me. I need to figure this out, do this myself. I can't trust anybody. I have to do it myself. Again, I think while it's understandable how these personal narratives emerge, I think they're very limiting. And so the real opportunity is for us to evolve those personal narratives to focus more on opportunities that are really inspiring to us and that can help motivate others to join us in addressing that opportunity, whatever it is. So I'll just stop on the narrative side. At least I'll give you a sense of what I'm talking about when I talk about that pillar. Second, please.
You said narrative, even geography narrative. Is that like the Rocky Mountains were formed by the shifting of the tectonic plates, or what do you mean with
geographic narratives have to do with what is, again, it's a sense of what's the view of the future and what's the call to action to people in that geography. And I go throughout history. I think many of the great cities that we've seen emerge over time in history, places like Florence and Vienna, had incredibly powerful geographical narratives that really inspired people and drew people to come together to address the opportunity that had been identified by the city. And I am in Silicon Valley. I've been here for 40 years. And I believe one of the keys to the success of Silicon Valley was a very powerful opportunity-driven narrative that drew people from all over the world to come to Silicon Valley. I think few people recognize the majority of successful entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley were not born in the United States, much less in Silicon Valley.
Right.
They were drawn here by an opportunity that was so inspiring. They got up and moved and came out here and came together to address this opportunity. So anyway, I think, again, it's an untapped opportunity for us in our geographies to figure out what is a narrative that would really inspire people, bring people together, pull more people towards us. So
thanks.
It's a geographical narrative. So let me go to the second pillar, passion. Again, I'm ambivalent about using the word because in my experience, everyone has a different definition of passion. I can guarantee in a large meeting, if I ask everyone to define passion, everyone has a different definition. I will give you my definition, and it's a specific form of passion that emerged from research that I did. I went out and looked and tried to find environments where there's sustained extreme performance improvement. And I tried to see what was common across all those environments. And one of the common elements was that all the participants in those environments had a very specific form of passion. And I call it the passion of the explorer. And just at a very high level, the passion of the explorer has three elements to it. One is the people who have this passion have a long-term commitment to being in a domain. And not just being in the domain, but having more and more impact in that domain. And it could be anything from marketing to medicine to gardening, but it's being in that domain and having more and more impact in that domain over time. Second element of the passion of the explorer is what I call a questing disposition. And what I mean by that is, what's the reaction of people who have this passion when confronted with an unexpected challenge? They get excited about it. Wow, this is an opportunity to have more impact, to learn how to have more impact, something that I hadn't ever expected. But now I can have more impact. They're excited. Third element of the passion of the explorer is what I call a connecting disposition, which is the reaction of these passionate people when confronted with these unexpected challenges. Their first reaction is, who else can I connect with? Who can help me get to a better answer faster? So they're extremely connected and asking for help all the time when they face challenges and problems that they haven't been able to resolve themselves. So it's a very powerful way to drive learning. And I think the passionate explorers are learn very, very rapidly. And I should clarify here too, and this is a theme throughout my book, a key theme in the book is the increasing importance of learning and motivation to learn. But when I talk about learning, I'm not talking about learning in the form of sharing existing knowledge, going to a class and listening to a teacher give a lecture. I don't want to dismiss that. Certainly there's value in sharing existing knowledge. But in a world that's more and more rapidly changing, existing knowledge becomes obsolete at an accelerating rate. And so the most powerful form of learning is creating new knowledge. And the best way to do that is not sitting in a classroom, it's acting, going out and doing something and observing the impact that you've achieved and reflecting on it and figuring out how you can have more and more impact. That's the way to learn. And learn together. Again, a key message in my book is no matter how smart and talented you are as an individual, you're going to learn a lot faster when you come together in a small group that shares that passion around learning and having more impact. And that's, I think, something that I think is increasingly important in the journey beyond fear, is cultivating this passion of the explorer and coming together in small groups to pursue that passion. So, third pillar, hopefully then I can step back and hear what I've provoked in terms of questions and discussion and potentially even some disagreement. The third pillar is platforms. And again, everybody's talking about platforms today. But I have a very different focus on platforms, because most of the platforms that we know today and talk about today fall into two categories. They're either what I would describe as aggregation platforms that are bringing elements together to support short-term transactions, buying and selling products, retail platforms, database platforms where if you have a specific data need, you can post your request, get the data, transaction done, over. Short-term transactions. There's a second kind of platform that there are social platforms that are all about helping participants to develop and foster relationships with each other, friends and family. We're all familiar with the social platforms. I'm talking about another kind of platform that I believe is not yet developed, but needs to be and will create huge potential for all of us. And it's what I call learning platforms. And again, my focus here is not on learning platforms in terms, and we were all familiar with these platforms where you can access videos of classes all the time. No, that's sharing existing knowledge. I'm talking about learning platforms where the primary design goal is how do we help all participants to develop new knowledge by coming together and acting together and learning in the process. And the core element of these learning platforms, I believe, are these small groups that I call impact groups. They're typically 3 to 15 people. And creating a platform where these people can come together in shared workspaces to learn together, and then connecting those impact groups into broader networks so they can learn at scale. So that's a very different form of platform, one we don't really have today. I believe is really going to be critical to the journey beyond fear, because the more we can come together around the excitement and inspiration to pursue opportunities and learn about how to achieve those opportunities and achieve more impact, that's going to be what will make us more successful. So I think that I'll just kind of close on another theme in the book, which is that I think, at least in my experience, for decades, we've had a whole set of initiatives that fall broadly under the umbrella of human potential or personal growth. They're all about helping people to achieve more of their potential by addressing obstacles and challenges they're facing as individuals and helping them to achieve more potential. That's one set of initiatives. There's another set of initiatives that have been proceeding in parallel for decades that broadly fall under the umbrella of social change. These initiatives are focused on changing the institutions, the communities, the economy, the society that we have to help create a better environment for all of us. The interesting thing to me is these two sets of initiatives have proceeded in parallel for decades, and there's actually been very little interaction between the two. It's either all about the individual or it's all about the broader environment. I believe that until we bring these two together and focus on building the motivation in individuals to achieve more of their potential, and then creating environments that encourage them to achieve more of their potential, we're never going to achieve what is possible. And so one of my goals in the book is to show that these two need to come together and that that's part of the opportunity that we have. And I'll just say again, other messages, I'm a strong believer that the world we're heading into, and that we're in today actually, has exponentially expanding opportunity. We can create so much more value with far less resource and far more quickly than would have ever been imaginable a decade or two ago. Exponentially expanding opportunity. But if we're driven by fear, we don't even see those opportunities. We're so much focused on the threats that we don't even see the opportunities, much less have the motivation to pursue them. So my view is the journey beyond fear is finally going to help us not only see the opportunities, but act together to address them. So let me stop there, Mark, and see what we can provoke here.
Yes, and I took a lot of notes. Would anybody has a burning question right away? You can also get off mute and don't need to put it in the chat. One question I have is there any institution on the track towards building a learning platform or bringing human potential and social change together?
I don't see it in any significant way. I mean, there are pieces that are out there. One of the things that I'm intrigued by is some of you may be familiar with a platform called Baby Center, which is targeted to parents with small children. And it provides an environment for them to learn in addressing the challenges that it's a life-changing event when we have our first, child, or even second or third child. We often need help. How can we address this unexpected challenge that our child is raising? And it creates an environment where parents with small children can come together and help each other learn how to deal with small children. So that's one potential example. But I'll give another example, a very different example, but again, it's not as fully developed as I would have liked, and it was actually a couple of decades ago. I asked people, how many of you have heard of a company called Portal Player? Almost nobody has ever heard of them. And then I asked, well, how many of you have heard of the iPod? And virtually everybody, yeah, I've heard of the iPod. Well, the myth about the iPod is that Steve Jobs one day in his office came up with this brilliant idea to merge digital music players with online music service, and the rest is history. The story actually begins many years before, when several executives came together in a startup called Portal Player. And they looked ahead and they saw the opportunity to create digital music players that would be mass market consumer products. But at the time they came together, there were enormous technology challenges. The quality of the music was not good. The size of the device, the cost of the device, the battery life. There were so many things that were obstacles to having a viable consumer product. And the founders of this company were smart enough to realize they didn't have all the answers, and they weren't going to come up with all the answers. And so they organized a network, a platform, if you will, of leading edge technology players in all the different domains of the technology required. And they set up every 6 months, they said every 6 months, we're going to come out with a new digital music player technology platform. And the best technology at any point in time will be part of that release. But if you don't make it into that release, don't worry, there's another release 6 months later. So it created an incredible motivation for technologists to come together around the world to address the technology challenges. And in a few years, the technology dramatically evolved to the point where it became a viable consumer product. So anyway, let me stop there, and just those are a couple of examples that I think are illustrative.
But then how did it go then to, and was Apple then using that, or was it?
Oh, no, well, the full story, I'm sorry, I could go on forever. The story is that there was an executive now I'm going to blank on the name. It was a very well-known electronics company.
Tony Fadell.
Sorry?
Tony Fadell, right?
I'm sorry.
Tony Fadell?
Yes, but where was he? Was at another company. He was an executive at a company. He came up with the idea for a digital music player integrating with a music service. presented it to the executives, leadership of his company. They said it was a terrible idea. He quit on the spot. And then he went wandering through Silicon Valley, knocking on doors, trying to find somebody who would be interested in this idea. And one day he had the good fortune of knocking on Steve Jobs' door. Steve Jobs, to his credit, saw the brilliance of this idea. He said, "You're hired immediately. You have 9 months to come out with the first digital music player." And Tony, realizing that he couldn't do this in 9 months, but remembering he had had a conversation with Portal Player, his first phone call was to Portal Player. And Apple's first iPod was essentially the Portal Player technology platform with an Apple shell around it. And as they say, the rest is history. So
That is so cool. Gideon, you have a question. Do you want to voice it or should I read it? 3, 2. Oh, yeah, please.
Sorry, had the sticker closed. I just was wondering if the whole thing you were just talking about with these sort of learning communities, you made me think of an example. Are you familiar with, in India, there's something called community managed natural farming? And it's these farmer field schools that have like scaled. I mean, I think it's about 1 million farmers now that are part of this sort of network of networks, and that they are doing exactly that sort of thing, right? Where they're practicing and learning from each other and sort of able to very quickly both share information that's being generated, but then also sort of ask questions at a large scale so they can run tests and, you know, try something on, say, 10,000 farms and then kind of see what happens.
No, that's great. I've heard of them, but I'm not deeply familiar with them. And you know, my general sense in these networks, there are other kinds of networks like that. And the baby center that I mentioned, to me, fits in that category. Most of the activity is around just sharing existing knowledge, asking a question and saying, does anybody have an answer? You know, has anybody encountered this? What did you do? And learning from others' experiences versus saying, no, here's a really powerful question. You know, how could we come together and answer this question that's never been answered before? And, you know, again, there are elements of that in some of these networks and platforms, but to me, that becomes the core of these learning platforms, is focusing on the unanswered questions and motivating people to come together to act in ways that will help them to answer the questions. So yeah, no, but I think there are a lot of kind of early things that give me optimism again that this can evolve and will evolve. But I think there's a lot more to be done in terms of really focusing people on the unanswered questions.
That could be the tagline of the Future Salon, focusing on the unanswered questions. Talking about unanswered questions.
And I just can't resist, given that, one of my favorite quotes, some of you have heard it, but I repeat it endlessly, is from Pablo Picasso, the famous painter. And he, many decades ago, made the observation, he said, you know, computers are completely useless. All they can do is provide you with the answers. He said, what's really important are the questions. What are the questions?
And talking about questions, Lauren is next with a question.
Thank you very much. John, thank you for your presentation tonight. What my question centers on is, what specifically would you, how would you take your 3 ideas to activists who are working on the ground on social justice issues, environmental issues? In other words, people who are really, really boots on the ground and doing incredible work, working incredibly hard and working towards social change.
Great question. And there's a whole chapter in my book on movements and what can help movements to achieve more impact in what they're trying to address. And at a high level, and this draws on research. I've studied movements for for decades throughout history, many different eras of history and many different parts of the world. And one of the things I've discovered, at least my research suggests, that the most successful movements throughout history and in different parts of the world have had two elements. One is what I call an opportunity-based narrative. They are focused on framing a really inspiring, powerful opportunity that motivates people to come together and drive the change that's necessary. They don't play to fear. They don't have what I call a threat-based narrative, which is all about the terrible things that are going to happen to us if we don't move. And again, it's a bit of a balancing act. Obviously, in a movement, you're focused on the obstacles and challenges to getting to that opportunity. But it's that emphasis on the opportunity. What could we accomplish if we all came together? And by the way, we have to come together because there are significant obstacles and challenges that are going to prevent us from achieving that opportunity. So focus on opportunity-based narratives, first element. Second element is this notion of impact groups. One of the things I found in successful movements is they all have what I describe as a cellular structure. They are organized into small cells, 3 to 15 people. And here I can't resist, one of the articles that really inspired me in this was Malcolm Gladwell wrote an article on the evangelical movement. And he said, you know, when the media covers the evangelical movement, they go to these mega churches on Sunday and they film the preacher preaching to thousands of people, and that's the evangelical movement. He said, no, that's not the evangelical movement. He said the evangelical movement are small groups of people. He called it the cellular church. Small groups of people, 3 to 15 people, who come together at least twice a week in addition to the Sunday sermon, and are focused on what action can we take to achieve more impact in our communities. And he said that's what's driving the growth of the evangelical movement. It's not, you know, yes, there's inspiration from the Sunday sermons, but the cellular church is these small cells that are focused on action, committed to action together. And so that would be my advice to any movement, is what's the opportunity-based narrative that's really inspiring to people, and then how can you organize into cells so that small groups, and then connect them into networks. Obviously they need to scale, it can't just be a small group, but scaling through networks versus just having everybody in a mass meeting.
That is very, very powerful. I have a question that came, that I also asked you in the 3 questions that I wanted you to answer, and maybe you can go into a little bit more detail. You talk about the passion of explorer. How do we instill that in our kids?
Yeah, you know, I believe, and one of the pushbacks, by the way, I get from people when I talk about the passion of the explorer is, oh, come on, John, some of us are capable of passion, but most of us just want to be told what to do and have the security of a paycheck. That's what most of us want. Well, you know, my response is, let's go to a playground and look at children 6 or 7 years old. Show me one that's not really excited and curious and asking questions and taking risks, wanting to do things to learn. And the problem is they went to school and they were taught in school, listen to the teacher and memorize everything the teacher says, and then play it back on the exam to prove that you've memorized it. And by the way, if you have a passion, pursue it on the playground or back at home, but not in the classroom. And I think, you know, to the point, I think the key in terms of encouraging them to find a passion is starting with actually encouraging them to find a passion. I think many parents, unfortunately, are encouraging our children to just find a career that's either high status or highly remunerative and pursue that. And forget about passion. I think the key for parents and for schools and for all of us is to tell children, and I've told it was my daughters when they were growing up, the only advice I gave them was I said, find your passion and don't stop until you find it. And once you found it, find a way to make a living from it so that you can integrate your work with your passion. And that's the only thing you need to do. And so, again, I just don't think enough of us are giving that message to the children, and the children are, again, in many cases, they're actually losing any sense of even the possibility of passion. They're so focused on memorizing and following instructions that they've given up looking for it, much less, pursuing it. And I think it's a tragedy.
And I have to jump in that regard, that I think one of the positive outcomes of COVID and us being at home with the children is that there is a lot of movement in regards to education, and people are waking up to other opportunities, and so we see that at our school that you can absolutely, with that online platform, dial into the passion and support that, and find the experts that are also passionate about it. That I sometimes say it's a passion engine, because teach what they are super passionate about, and the kids come in and then with their interest and get ignited from that passion as well. And
I'll say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
End of plugging out school for today. But after all, they are providing the Zoom meeting, so I feel it's okay that I
absolutely
share that.
Absolutely. But I will say too that to your point about the pandemic and the reaction, I'm struck by the number of people who have told me that the pandemic has been a catalyst for them to really step back and reflect on how they're spending their time, and realizing that their time is being consumed by tasks that really don't have any meaning to them. And it's been a catalyst for them to say, no, I need to find something that really excites me, that really is going to have meaning for me. And that I believe there's going to be a significant turnover of people at work after the pandemic, as they start to say, now I need to find a work that really does excite me versus just getting the security of a paycheck. So we'll see.
Any other questions? Please come unmute and ask it. Don't come unhinged, just unmuted.
I've left them speechless. What can I say?
Oh, hi. I'm curious if the kind of fears that we have, whether it's fear of success or fear of failure or fear of something else, has an influence on the way that you shape narrative.
Good question. I think it's a bit of a cycle or circle. I mean, I think that certainly if you're feeling fear, you're going to be more inclined to see threat out in the future, and your narrative is going to become more and more focused on threat, which is going to feed the fear in return. So I think that, but I do think that the narrative itself, and by the way, I will say that I mentioned earlier that I think fear is understandable, and the fear I'm talking about is fear of the future, and three different dimensions, at least, that feed that fear. One is we live in a world of mounting performance pressure. Competition is intensifying on a global scale in many different dimensions and levels. I mean, workers increasingly are fearful that they're going to have their jobs taken by robots or by workers in lower income countries. Can go global with our workforce. So intensifying competition feeds fear. Second is the accelerating pace of change. Things are changing at a more and more rapid rate. Things we thought we could count on are no longer there. That's scary. And then because of all the connectivity we've created on a global basis, small events in some faraway place in the world quickly cascade into extreme events that disrupt our best laid plans. Dare I say pandemic. And those extreme disruptive events are very scary. So I think there are many, many elements, many forces that drive that fear. And I think it's again, understandable that we should be afraid. Those are pretty challenging things. But again, my view is if we let ourselves be governed by that fear, we're just going to be more and more limited in terms of addressing the potential that we have and the opportunities that are emerging at the same time. I would say that, again, I talk about the paradox of what I call the big shift. This is based on my research about the long-term forces that are reshaping the global economy. And on the one side, these forces are creating mounting performance pressure that I just talked about. Those three elements coming together, creating increasing pressure. Every year, more and more pressure. At the same time, the paradox is those same forces are creating what I mentioned earlier, exponentially expanding opportunity. We can create much more value with far less resource, far more quickly. The challenge and opportunity for all of us is how do we move from that mounting performance pressure to the exponentially expanding opportunity. And I don't think we're going to do it with fear. So that's the motivation for writing the book.
I have a question, Mark. Can you hear me?
Andrew, yeah.
We can hear you, yes, we
So
can.
one of my fears is that California and the whole Western United States is going to run out of water. Can you give us a perspective on that as a futurist or as a somebody somehow to conquer that fear?
No, again, there are many things that are creating challenges for all of us. I mean, water, climate change, there are all kinds of things. I think that the thing to focus on is the opportunity that we have with new technology and new practices to reduce our consumption of water. And one of the big things in technology is water desalination, which is becoming more and more commercially viable. So we can take seawater that previously was not relevant to us and make it drinking water or cooking water, whatever. So I think, again, it's really focusing on what's the opportunity to create much more value with the resources we have in the world today, and not be limited by the resources, but find ways to create more and more impact with those resources. So,
and San Diego is actually leading the charge. They build desalination plants and are autark from weather patterns, as far as I know, and I heard about that about 10 years ago already. So it is possible, but we have to also then not in my backyard NIMBY things. Who wants to have the desalination plant next door when you used to have like the direct access to beach? So they're always ups and downs.
Mark, I wonder, I just have to chime in here. I wonder if do you know about the Can We Rehydrate California tour that was a couple of years ago? So there's like just a whole conversation about hydrological function as it relates to soil structure, and that the degradation of soil structure because of agriculture in California is largely responsible for a lot of the desiccation and desertification that's happened there. So it's not only just climate change from carbon dioxide, but it's actually like land use patterns and soil sponge and then hydrological function. And so like efforts to restore the correct structure of soil as a living organism actually have a lot of impact on how much rain falls and how water recycles and things. And there's some really interesting stuff there. So I just wanted to bring that up since we're talking about it.
Mark, John, can I chime in picking up Gillian? Australia, of course, is the driest country on earth. And I spent a lot of time in California, and the head of Southern California Water could name 10 innovations from Australia that if he could bring to California would solve the problem. And one is water conservation. You know, your irrigation methodologies are amongst the most inefficient on earth. You know, the way you push the water around the state is amongst the best ways to lose water through evaporation. And then we've built a huge desalination plant near Melbourne, but it's out of town, it's on the coast, it's low profile, it actually looks stunning, and it's 100% run by renewables. So the formulas are there, it's just, and there are people in California who understand that Australian experience. But Mark, the question I really wanted to ask John, and I practiced it yesterday, is his book, The Power of Pull, which he wrote a little over a decade ago, has been one of the most influential books in my life. And it analysed, you know, exactly the question that was raised earlier about movements and how you attract people. And in the book, there are some references to that. And John, you know, whenever you've been in Australia, you are magnetic, you know, you have the power of pull. So how do those three platforms, you know, passion, you know, the curiosity, each of the platforms, you know, how do they relate to improving people's power of pull?
Wow. Yeah, it's a great question. And it's actually prompting me to write a piece on how to connect power of pull with the journey beyond fear, because there are connections. I just didn't make it explicit in this new book. You know, at a high level, I would say the whole concept of narrative is about the power of pull. It's framing a really inspiring opportunity with a call to action to pull others to join forces to pursue that opportunity. It's pulling them together versus a command and control. You know, you need to do this, get into the line and do your job. No, it's inspiring people to act on their own initiative together. And then the passion of the explorer, again, is the power of pull, because people who have this passion pull people into them, to them, because they're so excited and so inspired by an opportunity that others feel that energy. And the people with the passion are constantly asking for help. They're not, you know, they're saying, I don't know, can you help me? And so they're pulling people, trying to get people to address this really big opportunity that is exciting them. And so I think that's, again, power of pull. And then learning platforms, again, if properly designed, are organized around really big, inspiring opportunities and create a platform where they can pull people and bring them together in ways where they're going to learn faster and achieve much more impact. So it's definitely connected. Everything I do in life is connected one way or another. And thank you for helping to really pull that out and make it more explicit. But, yeah.
As you know, I'm a big fan for The Power of Pull second edition, because Lauren, if you haven't read it, it's 10 years old, but it is a manifesto.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah.
What an endorsement. Any other questions live? Otherwise, there is Mark L was posting that from his perspective, how can those of us who know that there will be no magic technology saving us from millions or billions of deaths and mass extinctions coming from exponentially increasing global climate change. Most people have no idea how exponential change happens, and that there is nothing we can do now to stop this dark future from happening. So this is very much from fear.
Yeah, and again, my belief is the whole climate change movement is a threat-based narrative. It's all about we're going to die. And guess what? The result is there's less and less action. If we're going to die and it's inevitable, why should we act? Let's live for the moment, enjoy what we have for the moment, because we're all going to die. And I think the need is to really frame what kind of opportunity in terms of creating a global ecosystem where everybody prospers and thrives over time is, to really motivate people to say, we can do this. And there are exponential developments in technology, I believe, that can help us to create that kind of global ecosystem. But again, it's more focused on just, we're all going to die. It's inevitable. The ocean's rising, the temperature's rising, everything's going to destroy us. So, I don't know.
Any other questions?
I would like to comment if possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you for letting me speak twice. I would like to, I don't have a lot of fear. I have worry, I have concern, but I do not live in a world of fear. Maybe that's also because I have food, clothing, shelter. But what I'd like to comment on is many people here, including myself, have strong connection to Silicon Valley. I was raised in Palo Alto. I find a lot of the belief structures in Silicon Valley antithetical to what you are suggesting that we create. Because Silicon Valley, Palo Alto has a very self-absorbed, it's the individual matters over the group. And that is a very fear-based orientation because you're isolated. So how is it that you would think, or maybe you don't think, that the whole mindset in Silicon Valley, or a lot of it, has to shift away from this extreme accomplishment, which is driven by each person's success value, and have people think more of the group, which inherently tends to mean that you have to share more. Therefore, you don't feel as isolated. So it's kind of a conflict and a paradox. I ask you, how do you address Silicon Valley because it's so powerful?
Yeah, well, it requires generalization and there are exceptions. But, I was actually very inspired by a book that was written 20 years ago, I think now, by a professor at Berkeley by the name of Annalise Saxenian. And I highly recommend the book because she ended up looking back 20 years before that and said, 40 years ago, there were two big technology centers in the United States. There was Route 128 around Boston, and there was Silicon Valley. And she said over decades, Route 128 became more and more marginalized and collapsed, and Silicon Valley prospered. She said, why? And she said one of the key reasons from her research was that in Route 128, number one, people went to work for a company, and that was where they spent their lives, their careers, in that one company. And all the people they dealt with were the people in that company. That was their whole network of connection. She said in Silicon Valley, first of all, if people spend more than a couple of years with one company, they're deeply suspect. They're constantly moving from one company to another. There's an incredible flow of people and talent across companies. And she said the other thing from her research was that people in Silicon Valley are constantly asking for help in social settings. They go to bars and clubs, and they're quickly talking about the big issue, the challenge they're facing, because at least my belief, she didn't say it in these terms, is they do have the passion of the explorer, and they are looking for help, and they're connected in ways that help them to succeed much more. Now, I will say too, again, just to clarify, I've been in Silicon Valley now for 40 years, and I've seen it go through cycles. I think the core of Silicon Valley, again, are people who've been drawn here from all over the world by this narrative of helping to change the world with technology. We have the potential to make a far better world with this technology. That's what excites them. That's what brings them here. And by the way, if I make money, that's fine. But the meaning for me is changing the world. And then over time, as companies prosper and success spreads, it draws in people who just want to make money. They want to make a quick buck, get out. And when the bubble bursts in Silicon Valley, and it's burst several times, those people leave because they can't make money in the short term. The people who stay are those who are driven by the passion of changing the world. They're going to stay regardless. And so I think, again, I believe that actually, and again, it's generalization, not true of everyone, but I think the core of Silicon Valley over decades has been people who have this passion of the explorer and who are driven to have more and more impact in making the world a better place. And money is just again, a side thing. If they get it, fine, but the goal is change the world. So I'm generalizing, but that's at least my experience. And again, Annalise Saxenian really confirmed this culture of sharing knowledge and coming together. It's not just isolated individuals, at least in her research. No, the success of Silicon Valley was the connectivity of all the people and willingness to be vulnerable and ask questions and ask for help. So anyway, so let me just stop there and see.
It was great. Look back. Any other questions from the audience? And yes, you can ask a second or third question. No problem.
No limit to questions or disagreements. Come on. Welcome disagreements too.
Or disagreement. If there is none, I would like to. How do you in your personal life, and what is the recommendation for habits to create to get away from fear and more towards embracing the opportunities and fostering the passion?
Yeah, well, that's again a key focus in the book. It's partly my own journey, and in the context of personal narratives and fear, you know, I share that my childhood was shaped by fear. I was extremely afraid as a child and in my younger years as an adult. And it took me many years, many decades to really overcome that fear and cultivate other emotions. And it really wasn't until my 50s when I finally made that journey beyond fear. But I think part of that journey was reflecting on what was drawing me to different places and different activities. So one of the things, again, I mentioned 40 years ago, I moved to Silicon Valley. I was drawn here. There were many elements that attracted me, but one of the key elements was the sense of optimism in Silicon Valley. Everybody was focused on the opportunities. And that to me, even though I was still driven by fear, it helped to modify my fear to be surrounded by people who were so much driven by opportunities. And so just reflecting on what actions did I take and why did I take them and what really excites me was ultimately what helped me to step back and say, there are opportunities that really are exciting for me and that will help me to move forward in spite of my fear. But it's that process of reflection. And again, the concept of personal narrative, of looking at what's your view of the future and what's your call to action to others, becomes critical to really evolving beyond fear and cultivating these other emotions.
Hey, John, Michael Guzik here. Good to see you, man.
Hey, hi.
How you doing? So
Good.
you just mentioned something very interesting. I'd like you to dive into it a little bit more. You've mentioned calls to action, and then you
Yes.
said asking for help earlier. Now
Yeah.
there's a distinction between those two, or are you calling them the same thing?
Good question. I think they're similar and related. To me, the call to action is about a really big opportunity that you alone cannot address. You're never going to achieve that opportunity if it's just you. So you're calling others to say, we need to come together because this is such an exciting opportunity and we're only going to achieve it if we come together. That's the call to action. But it's also a call for help. It's saying, I can't do this on my own. You know, I'm smart, I'm strong, whatever, but it's such a big opportunity, such a huge opportunity that I can't do it myself. So I need help. And again, I think it builds trust that you're asking for help, but it also excites people because you're asking for help to address a very exciting opportunity. You're not asking for help in terms of just donating money to you to, you know, to move forward or whatever. It's, no, we need to address this opportunity together and we're all going to prosper and benefit from that opportunity. So it's an interesting, you know, blend between call to action and call for help or asking for help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Julian, do you want to ask a question?
Sure. I just was thinking about what you were talking about with geographies and Silicon Valley and things, and I was thinking about sort of the narrative that's starting to emerge around regeneration, right? And like this idea of how do we, you know, create new ways of doing all the human society things that are fundamentally regenerative of life and supportive of long-term life on Earth, et cetera. And I've noticed there isn't a specific geography. It doesn't seem like, it seems like there's sort of hot spots distributed around the globe that are kind of interesting. I don't know if is it going to have a different pattern because of being more global in nature, or like, will there be a spot that settles? I don't know, just curious if you had thoughts about that.
No, it's a great question. I think that again, there's the balance between, on the one hand, geographies that can become centers and magnets for certain activity and initiatives, but then there are movements that can be global. They don't have to be geographically situated. They can be truly global, motivating people from around the world to participate. And so I think it's an opportunity for certain geographies potentially to frame the opportunity. And here I may be a bit provocative on this in that, and I actually wrote a blog post about this a few months ago, challenging. There are all kinds of terms today like sustainability, regeneration, circular economy. You know, and while I understand the motivation and what's behind that, I worry about the terms in the sense that they suggest just going back, you know, or sustaining what we have. You know, let's sustain what we have. Let's regenerate, which means let's generate what we had, regenerate it. Or a circular economy, let's just keep going in circles. I believe the opportunity is for us to achieve so much more and generate so much more value with far less resource. but that's just, missing from, at least when I hear those terms talked about, that concept of thriving, of really achieving things that we would have never been able to achieve in the past. Yes, we need to regenerate, we need to sustain, we need to, circulate the goods and purpose them, but is that all there is? Is that really all there is? To me, the opportunity is for us to thrive in ways that would have been unimaginable a few decades ago, while regenerating and sustaining and all the rest.
And so what is your thought about space and exploring that? And because John Robb, who was also presenting here a while ago, he actually twice, he made an observation that there is so much great resources out there, and we could create a race to get that and use it, and that would actually allow us to come together as a whole around that challenge, and that would actually unite us as a possibility.
It's certainly a possibility. I am not a space expert, so I would definitively say what the opportunities are out there in terms of resources and bringing them back in an economically and environmentally effective way. But I do think that, just here on Earth, I believe we have the potential to thrive and do far more with the resources that are here on Earth than we've done, in ways that are less damaging to the environment and to others, and bring more people into the society and economy in a way that they can prosper as well. I don't know, just yeah.
Lovely. Any other questions?
I have a question. I don't know if you want to answer it, but I in your book. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. In your book, you mentioned your project, that you're wanting to build something, and I guess in the spirit of the conversation, any help? Anything you've been hitting, or in our group, you want to say, "Hey, here we are, a bunch of people that might be able to help." What's you been hitting?
No, that's my passion of the explorer. Is the opportunity that really excites me is this notion of creating what I call a learning platform that will help us to achieve more of our potential. And my goal with the book is to hopefully be a catalyst for people to see the need and the opportunity to move beyond fear. And while I think the book can help, I'm not at all of the belief that you just read the book and you have all the answers and you'll make the journey without any problem. I think there's the need for continuing help. And so what I want to do is create a set of programs that will help people to do things like evolve their personal narrative. What is your personal narrative today? How can you evolve it in ways so you'll have more impact? How do you find your passion? How do you pursue your passion, integrate it with your work? There are all kinds of questions like that I think programs can help people once they've read the book and are motivated to pursue it. But it's the notion, the view I have of I'm calling it a center, is that while we'll offer programs, it's not kind of standalone workshops where you just go for a few hours or a few days and it's over. It's this notion of a journey. If you come into the center, you're going to start a journey, and there will be programs along the way that can help you, but it's just part of the journey. And a key element in the journey is, and I believe a key role of the center, is to bring people together into small groups, 3 to 15 people, so that you're not making the journey alone. you're making it with a group of people that can really provide you with support and challenge you at the same time, and provide coaching to those small groups, and then connecting those small groups onto platforms where they can learn faster together. And so that's what really excites me. I'm definitely viewing the book as just the launch pad for something much more significant and sustained over time. I would welcome help. I mean, I freely admit this is just a very high level idea and opportunity. I don't have the details worked out, and I need help in designing programs, delivering them, evolving them. So I welcome any help. I'm eager for help. Thank you.
Great.
Hi, John. I have a question.
Yes.
I've loved the sort of holistic approach of your books. One burning question is, does it matter at what age you identify your passion for exploring?
Well, my belief is the earlier the better, for sure. But again, you know, in the memoir part of my book, I didn't really discover my passion until I was in my 50s. So a part of my message in the book, number one, is you can discover your passion at any age. It's not just when you're a child or a young adult. You can discover. One of the things that's really interesting to me, and again gives me optimism, is I'm seeing in the boomer generation, a lot of that generation who are heading into retirement are no longer saying, I just want to go out and play golf or fish. They're viewing it as an opportunity finally to find and pursue a passion and make a difference that's meaningful in the world. So these older people are using this as a catalyst to say, now I can finally find my passion and pursue it. And I think, you know, young people can do it as well. My goal in the book, and again, is my hope is that the younger, the better. I mean, the earlier you discover your passion, the more impact and meaning you're going to achieve in your life, the more excitement you'll feel. So do it earlier, but don't give up if you haven't found it, you know, and you're older, you can still find it.
Thank you. That was encouraging.
For sure.
And exactly along that line, I put a link to a book, What the Future. A friend of mine, Whitney Washburn, he lives also in Berkeley and is moving. But exactly, that is about the second act. So you are financially secure and all, and then how do you now find that what you want to do with the rest of your life and purpose and all that? So that is one way to find that and do that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and I also put a link into your workshop.
Oh.
Yeah. So
okay.
I have been also part of that, and it's so if you want to go deeper into what you heard today and get set up on the path towards your own impact groups and finding your passion and all that, I highly recommend to go on to the workshop that John Hagel is giving.
Now, I should mention I'm developing what I call pilot programs that will start to become the foundation for this new center. But one pilot program is around helping people evolve their personal narrative. Another pilot program is around helping people to find their passion of the explorer and pursue it. And then there's a third pilot program, which I haven't yet launched, but is focused on people who are participating in movements and helping them to achieve more impact in their movements with this notion of opportunity-based narrative and cellular structure and how that actually would work in a movement. So I'm early stage, but definitely wanting to test out some of these programs and get feedback on them. very much appreciate participation in those as well.
Yes, very much so. We have almost 90 minutes, and it went by so fast, and you had to talk a lot. So I think this is a great stopping point. I would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity, and I hope we fulfilled our promise of asking the best questions. And yeah, I hope that we continue to develop this, because I think it's very much aligned with what we want to do with the Future Salon, look at larger trends and see what we can do to steer it in a positive direction for all. And I think what you're doing there, creating such a movement where we go beyond fear and develop opportunities for everyone is really, really compelling, and I love that.
Now, I view the salon, I mean, it was a very rich discussion, set of questions. I view it as just a starting step, and would definitely encourage everyone to reflect on what they heard. I hopefully read the book if you haven't, and then just reach out and let's connect around the other questions or ideas you have, and very much wanting to continue the conversation for sure. Wonderful.
So yes,
So
recording will be available, and I encourage people to join the Future Salon community as well, and to continue conversation and inspiration there as well. And so there it will be posted first. But let me stop the recording. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming.